I'm Tammy Kolda, an applied mathematician, and this is Unlocking LaTeX Graphics. On this YouTube series, I'm providing a detailed how-to guide on using TikZ and PGF plots. These videos are based on my book, Unlocking LaTeX Graphics, as well as some bonus materials. Today's topic is bounding boxes in TikZ. These are the invisible boxes that tell LaTeX how big your picture is. We generally don't have to worry about them, but there are some tricks that can be useful, such as framing a picture using the bounding box. We'll show how bounding boxes work, how to make them bigger, and even how to make them smaller. This video assumes that you have some familiarity with TikZ already. If not, go back and watch some of my prior videos. We'll create our document at overleaf.com. We'll click New Project, Blank Project. We'll go ahead and call this Bounding Boxes in TikZ. We'll go ahead and get that started. I'm going to go ahead and close the left navigation and increase the size of the PDF to 150%. I'll make the edit box a little bit bigger today because we're going to need some extra space. Now I'll go ahead and add some front matter here, get rid of the defaults, and I'm going to add in the TikZ library, of course, because we always need that. We're going to use today the positioning and calc libraries in TikZ. I have links to the videos about these libraries in the show notes if you want to go back and review those. The parskip and full page packages are just to make things look nice. And the hyperref package is so that the name here links back to the YouTube channel. Today we'll talk about the bounding box, which is how LaTeX knows how big your picture is. So let me start off with a basic picture and then we'll illustrate the bounding box. So here I'm going to set up a picture with a single node of type circ. I'm defining a bunch of styles up top. So circ is a style that is useful for a node. It's a circle. I draw the outline thick. I fill it with yellow and I set the node font to large and sans serif font. I'll also define up here BBX, which we'll use for the bounding box, and OBBX, which we'll use for the old bounding box. And we'll come back to those. So let's go ahead and compile this. We get just a simple figure, which is just the letter A in a circle. Now let's see what the bounding box looks like. So here I'm drawing the bounding box using the BBX style, which is red and thick. And so what I've done is I've drawn a rectangle from current bounding box dot southwest to current bounding box dot northeast. So the current bounding box is an object that TikZ just creates, and it has these compass points on them, as well as the object center. Let me add another node to my picture. So I'll do another node B below right of A using the positioning library. And now when I recompile that, we can see that the bounding box has enlarged inside automatically. So let me go ahead and add yet another node to the above right of B. That node is C, and so now the bounding box grows again. Now let's add some edges and see what happens. So here I'm going to add an edge from A to B and another edge from A to C that bends left, so it's going to curve, and another edge from B to C. Now watch the bounding box here. As I recompile, the current bounding box went up a little bit because of this curving edge sticking up. So we covered nodes, edges, and paths in prior videos, which are linked in the show notes. We can also find the exact center of the bounding box and put an X there, just so you can see that it has that ability. So we have the current bounding box dot center. We're going to put an O times in the middle there, and let's compile that, and we get our mark right in the center of the bounding box. So if you ever want to find the center of your picture, now you know how to do that. It's also possible to make the bounding box even bigger with an invisible path. This can be useful when you want more space around the picture that you've drawn. So let's give another example here. So we'll start off with a version of our last drawing. This time I'm going to draw the bounding box with this OBBX type, which is a dashed red line. So let's see what happens if we want to add more space. So let's draw an invisible rectangle bigger than the current bounding box. So here I'm increasing the current bounding box by minus 0.5, minus 0.5 in the lower left, and I'll make it a little bigger also in the upper right. And it's just a path, so I'm not actually drawing anything, but watch how this thing moves when I compile it. So notice that it moved down to the right. That's to make extra space for this invisible rectangle, which affected the bounding box, and so it affected how large LaTeX thinks this is. Now, if I draw the new bounding box, which is now changed, we'll see that it's actually moved and it's bigger and it has even that invisible path inside of it. So that's kind of a trick for seeing that the bounding box has moved. Now you can use enlarging the bounding box to draw a frame around the picture. So let me draw an identical picture here and show you what we have. So I've kind of drawn the same thing here. Now what I've done is I've saved for the original bounding box, the southwest corner. and the northeast corner. And then I've drawn two rectangles, all in the same path statement. So I draw an inner rectangle, which just steps things out 0.1 at the lower left and the upper right using the calc library here. And then I draw an outer rectangle 0.5 away from those original points. So now we have sort of a nice little frame here, two rectangles. Now, the reason I did the same path statement is that I can actually fill between those using an interesting sort of trick. So I'm going to fill with brown, and I'm going to use something called the even-odd rule, which fills between the number of odd and even crossings emanating from the center of the picture. So that's why the smaller frame has to be first, and then the larger frame. And now it filled in between those. So that's a fun way to get a frame around your picture. It's also possible to shrink the current bounding box if you want LaTeX to treat your picture as if it were smaller. Let me repeat our prior picture, drawing the bounding box as a dashed line. I'm going to also add two new coordinates. I'm going to create a coordinate X, which I'm illustrating here with an orange circle in the lower left, and a coordinate Y, which I'm drawing as a blue circle up here. So I use the calc library to put these a little bit inside the current bounding box, and I draw a gray rectangle between those two coordinates. If I were to insert PGF reset bounding box before I draw that gray rectangle, I want you to look at what it looks like now, and then I'm going to compile it and see how it shifts. So when I reset that bounding box, now as far as LaTeX is concerned, this gray rectangle is actually the bounding box of the picture. So it will only include what comes after PGF reset bounding box as the definition of the bounding box. So it moved over to the left, so the picture's sticking out to the left and it's sticking up a little bit, and it's actually sticking down and to the right. So as far as LaTeX is concerned, that's the new bounding box. We can sort of confirm that by drawing the bounding box that it thinks it has, and in fact, it's right over that gray dot between the orange and blue dots. That's one way to sort of shrink the bounding box, which might be necessary to fool LaTeX for some reason. We can also fix the bounding box so that it's not affected by any subsequent additions to our picture. So let me give another example where we're going to fix the bounding box. So here, we're going to start off with that same picture. And then what I've done is I've added a special line that says path use as bounding box. So whenever I place that, it will use everything up to that point and on that line and then nothing else. So this fixes the bounding box. Anything I add after this is not going to change the bounding box. So let me add something that should normally change the bounding box, and we'll see that it won't. I'm going to draw a blue thick line from the center of the current bounding box to a point at 30 degrees and a distance of 10. And so now we see I've drawn this massive arrow, but it hasn't actually affected the bounding box. So we can see that that bounding box stayed fixed. And normally it would have moved everything down to make room for that blue arrow. So let's see again where the bounding box is for this picture, just to make sure that we understand where it was. And so if I draw the bounding box, it's that red box that we see there. I hope you enjoyed today's video. You should now know how to use bounding boxes in TikZ. There's a link to the Overleaf document we created in the show notes. Please click like or subscribe if you want more videos like this. And you can also buy my book, Unlocking LaTeX Graphics, at your favorite book retailer. Thanks for watching.